Hello and very warm welcome at Amish Shackle 5858. I am Amish Shackle. Foreign news have been reported by American, European, Asian, African, Australian news channels and the news agencies. So please let's go to the headlines.
Good morning, America. Breaking overnight, protests in Minneapolis and across the country as new video shows the moment before the killing of Renee Good.
That's fine, dude. I'm not mad.
Recorded by the ICE officer who fired the fatal shots. We're live in Minnesota with the Minneapolis police chief as the investigation continues this morning.
President Trump making his pitch to oil industry executives, urging them to invest in Venezuela's oil industry as the U.S. seizes another tanker in the Caribbean. The high-stakes meeting just days after the U.S. captured Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro.
Murder mystery deepens. Details emerging on the killings of an Ohio dentist and his wife. Body camera footage of police responding to the wrong home the day they were found dead. And a 911 call weeks before by neighbors of the victims.
Dramatic video. Police say officers opened fire on a suspect in a stolen front loader as he was driving right over police vehicles. What we're learning this morning.
Lacing up for magic. Will Gans takes us inside Walt Disney World's Marathon Weekend. We are there live for the races and the fun. Plus, Disney World magic ahead this year.
And NFL Wild Card Weekend. ESPN's coach Herm Edwards joins us in studio to preview today's game. The stage is set for the College Football National Championship. Will it be the Hoosiers? Will it be the Hurricanes?
Live ABC News headquarters in New York City. This is Good Morning America.
And we do say Good Morning America. We can't wait for Coach Herm here in the studio. So much has happened this week, and we're going to try to sort it all out for you. As you can see, Whit is co-anchoring right now from Minneapolis this morning, and that's exactly what we're here. The I share ABC News obtaining new zone video showing leading up to the video was recorded by the ICE agent who fired the shots.
This week, anger and outrage spilled out really across the nation. Vigils and rallies held all over protesting that fatal shooting. Minneapolis mayor is pleading for transparency. Whit has been on the ground in Minneapolis covering the kills, protests, and Whit, there is a lot to unpack.
Deepening unrest in Iran this Saturday night. What we're learning as the information blackout drags on, with open calls for regime change and more solidarity rallies here in Canada. ICE shootings fuel coast-to-coast protests in the U.S.
We refuse to accept this fascism.
The growing demonstrations and the UN weighing in after this week's deadly incident in Minneapolis. A new look at what we eat, the warning labels now appearing on Canadian food products. Plus, listening beneath the surface.
We had no idea if we could tell those different species sounds apart.
How scientists are using sound to track and protect fish.
Global National reporting tonight.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Defiant protests in Iran are showing no sign of letting up as an information blackout enters a third day. There is growing unrest and groups say C5 people been with more arrest in the nearly weeks. They were crippling conditions morphed in regime has cut internet lines, making it difficult to know the extent of what's happening. West intersiding with protesters, and today Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney condemned the clampdown and the of demonstration has our top story tonight.
Iran's Attorney General says Iranians could face the his new as on Saturday's revolution after multiple set on fire by protesters, some of whom chanted death to Khamenei. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei says demonstrators are destroying their country for the US President Donald Trump.
We just had a great meeting with the oil executives. It's sort of more deal. Going for a better development. A lot of it made by
Trump a great meeting with top oil executives to discuss rebuilding total security if they invested. Our next guest was in that meeting. His name is Jared Egan, and he's with the White House National Energy Dominance Council, and he joined us now for joining us. It's been a fascinating executive. Well, it needs build. Guys have the money to do it. We're going to provide the security. When I listened, I didn't get like a resounding yes from the president. We're really not Venezuela, but over the long investment, the $1 billion acknowledges with law, for example, repatriate the investment.
Well, it was a remarkable show the decisiveness and the strategy of President Trump and how it's paying off. To your point, he went around the room and every single person expressed gratitude for the end he's taken. A lot of these companies have already Venezuela over multiple years have left. Some have stuck through it, but what they were getting gratitude and really going to help America, but hugely benefit one of these massive resources locked, and Trump is liberating but under whole tensions where they can't get the materials they need, they can't get the products and the tools. And now imagine a world now where you have the access to the American ingenuity, the American system, where we can send in pumps, pressures, experts, all things into get them into the system, get refined into the continue, and they continue to produce. This is Sky News. The headlines: Iran warns anti-government protesters they could face the death penalty as the unrest sweeping the Islamic Republic nears 2 weeks. London, a protester tears down the Iranian flag at the embassy, replacing it with the flag that flew before the 1979 revolution. The United States carries out strikes in Syria, targeting the Islamic State militant group. Also ahead, the biggest shock in FA Cup history. Non-league Macclesfield stun holders Crystal Palace, beating them 2-1 in the third round.
I never thought that we'd be, beating Crystal Palace, and super proud of the players and the fans and the community that supported me all this way.
Large parts of the country prepare for new weather warnings as a man's found dead in Cornwall following Storm Goretti. The rare cases of childhood dementia. We hear from one father about the diagnosis that's shattered their lives. Good morning. Iran has intensified its threats against anti-government protesters, with the country's Attorney General warning that anyone taking part could face the death penalty. Due to an internet blackout and cut phone lines, it's become more difficult to gauge the scale of the mass protests across the Islamic Republic as the unrest nears the 2-week mark. At least 72 people have been killed, more than 2,000 detained, according to the US-based human rights activist news agency. Our international correspondent Diana Magnay reports.
Through Friday night, the protests continued. Don't underestimate the bravery of chanting this in Iran. Death to the dictator, death to Khamenei. There is a near total internet shutdown, but still some videos do make it out via Elon Musk's Starlink, though the authorities are trying to jam that too. It limits what we know about what's going on and how people inside the country connect. But it hasn't stopped them gathering. Not yet. Huge crowds in Mashhad, Iran's second largest city, and where the Ayatollah was born. Streets packed here in an area of northern Tehran, chanting around the fire. There's a sense of jubilation and of momentum here, given the scale of this protest. In Karaj, near Tehran, a key municipal building in flames. And elsewhere in the same city, the sound of the authorities' response. They're trying to kill us, a man says off camera. We don't know how tough the crackdown has been. That's half the point of shutting down the internet.
We saw back during November 2019, if you remember those national uprisings, and that basically we saw a week-long internet shutdown, during which time the regime used the blackout to help them basically massacre protesters. Estimates are 1,500 protesters that we know of were killed during that blackout.
But state TV shows how the regime tries to intimidate those on the streets, sending in swarms of men on motorbikes. We will not give in to rioters. We will put them in their place, this man says. Our master is not Trump, another yells. We give our life for our master. We give our life for this flag. But the old pre-revolutionary flag is also making an appearance. And a figure from the past who wants to be a part of Iran's future. Reza Pahlavi, son of the former Shah, or king, who's been in exile in the US for most of his life. Now he's making calls for the protesters to keep going and to seize the city centres, and for key workers to go on strike.
I too am preparing to return to the homeland.
Today, 3 major fires rage across Victoria in the southwest, centre and northeast as more funding is announced.
We will continue to stand with you and support you on the recovery journey ahead. It's going to be a long one.
Heavy rain batters the North Queensland coast as ex-tropical cyclone Koji moves inland. welcome to ABC News. I'm Melissa McKay. We're going to take you straight to Brisbane, where the Queensland Premier David Crisafulli is providing an update on ex-tropical cyclone Koji.
The things which are obviously very important for people across that area. Rainfall is expected to continue south of Bowen to St Lawrence. And as I mentioned, that's an area south of Mackay, north of Rockhampton. A flood watch remains from Ayr all the way south to the Wide Bay, Burnett, and west to the Barcoo. Now, that's a large area, but it is a big system, and because in many cases they're swollen catchments, there remains a real risk of that flash flooding. And therefore, it's important that people to stay up to date, make sure that they, if you're in a low-lying area, that you do know your risks, and just stay safe on the roads. And as I have repeatedly said, the vast majority of people have conducted themselves in a really safe and a responsible way, but also in a great way of mateship, the way that people have worked with their neighbours and just more generally in the local area. And I just want to express my gratitude for that in the way that Queenslanders always conduct themselves in these events. The real risk remains the risk of flooding. They are swollen catchments, and in the hours and in the days ahead, there's expected to be significant rainfall still to come. Sue from the Bureau will touch on that, but that is something that I'm keen to express. To give an indication, the highest wind speed, which was recorded as the system crossed the coast, or just before, about 9:30, wind gusts of 113 kilometres was recorded at Hamilton Island. That's a significant wind speed, but again, the risk is of that heavy rainfall in that wide part of that area, and I continue to ask people to take heed of that. Other areas of focus. I want to start with transport.
This is Asia Now.
It's 11 a.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 8:30 in New Delhi, and 10 o'clock in Jakarta. Good morning. I'm Rani Samtani. At this hour, firefighters battling to contain several out-of-control bushfires across Australia's Victoria state. More than 300 homes destroyed. Gusty winds fueling the flames as heat waves sweep parts of the country. Voting is underway in the second phase of Myanmar's widely criticized military-run election. Turnout hit record lows in the first round. And Iran on edge as protests spread across the country. Authorities are intensifying their crackdown as demonstrations enter a second week. More than 70 people have been reported killed and around 2,600 arrested.
Africa News. The news.
The United Nations says that at least 53 people who fled ongoing fighting in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo have died in neighboring Burundi. Its refugee agency on Friday said 25 Congolese passed away due to a cholera outbreak, while 6 others died from anemia and other complications related to malnutrition. The UN says it's working with the local authorities and other partners in a bid to find out what happened in the other cases. More than 100,000 people have sought refuge in Burundi since December, when fighting between the Congolese army and the M23 rebels intensified in the border town of Uvira. They face particularly dire conditions with limited access to food and water, while many are living in makeshift shelters, offering little protection from the weather. About half of the displaced are reportedly children under the age of 18. As Sudan reaches 1,000 days of its devastating civil war, aid agencies have issued a grim reminder that it's civilians who continue to suffer the most from the conflict that shows no sign of ending.
Fighting continues across multiple fronts. In Kordofan, sieges have cut off the towns of Kadugli and Dilling, restricting food, healthcare, and access to farms and markets. In Darfur, fighting on the ground and drone attacks from the sky continue, and we have seen long-range strikes on civilian infrastructure far beyond the front lines.
The United Nations says over 20 million Sudanese require health assistance, while 21 million are in desperate need of food. An estimated 13.5 million people are currently displaced, making Sudan the largest displacement crisis in the world.
Today, our call is urgent. First, an immediate cessation of hostilities and real steps towards a lasting peace. Second, adherence to international humanitarian law with access facilitated across conflict lines and protection of civilians, including aid workers and civilian infrastructure.
Overcrowding in displacement sites, a breakdown in services, sexual and other forms of violence, and hunger are just some of the issues compounding the suffering of the Sudanese people.
Senegalese Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko said his government wouldn't seek a deal to restructure its debt despite facing repayment difficulties. The International Monetary Fund said the West African country's debt reached 132% of GDP at the end of 2024. The fund has since paused a $1.8 billion lending program, leaving Dakar struggling to meet its financing needs.
Egypt, from debt to prison, on France 24.
Welcome to Night Watch on France 24. I'm Alexander Orcott. These are the headlines this hour. Protesters rally across the United States against the actions of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, days after a woman is shot dead by an officer. Anti-regime protests pick up pace in Iran, despite warnings of a crackdown by the Revolutionary Guard. Thousands of Iranians are seen displaying the Shah-era lion and sun flag inside and outside the country. And thousands of Ukrainians are braving freezing winter conditions after the latest Russian bombardments caused widespread blackouts, including in the capital, Kyiv.
This is DW News live from Berlin. Protests spread across Iran despite a deadly crackdown. Leaders warn taking to the streets is punishable by death. Thousands have reportedly been detained and scores killed. That's as President Trump reaffirms that the US stands ready to help the protesters. So what are Washington's options? Also coming up.
We are going to do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not.
Donald Trump renews his threats against Greenland hours after all of the island's political parties sign a joint declaration in which they reject becoming a U.S. territory.
Thank you for watching Ahmed Shakil 5858. I am Ahmed Shakil. I hope you will visit again. Have a good life. Bye-bye.